Hi everyone. We have been talking about the Israelites, and once Pharaoh was asked to let them go to celebrate a festival and worship God, he decided to make life even harder for them, to take away their straw that they were to make things with and make them go gather it themselves, adding to their workload. Totally unfair. And that's the story we're going to look at this coming week. So for our midweek read aloud, I wanted to read a book that you're probably familiar with, the story at least, and there's a lot of unfairness going on here. Okay, so let's read Rumpelstiltskin together. This one is illustrated by Paul Ozolinsky. It's one of our family favorites. Once there was a poor miller who had a beautiful daughter. On his way to town one day, the miller encountered the king. Wanting to impress him, the miller said, "I have a daughter who knows the art of spinning straw into gold." Now the king had a passion for gold, and such an art intrigued him. So he ordered the miller to send his daughter to the castle straight away. When the girl was brought before him, the king led her to a room that was filled with straw. He gave her spools and a spinning wheel and said, "You may spin all night, but if you have not spun this straw into gold by morning, you will have to die." With that, he locked the door, and the girl was left inside alone. Very, very unfair, right? Because her father told this lie, trying to get attention or prestige from the king, she's suffering a fate she didn't deserve, right? That she's going to have to die unless she can find a way to make straw turn into gold. There sat the poor miller's daughter without the slightest idea how anyone could spin straw into gold. For the life of her, she did not know what to do. She grew more and more frightened, and then she began to weep. Suddenly, the door sprang open, and a tiny man stepped in. "Good evening, Mistress Miller," he said. "Why are you sobbing?" "Oh," the girl cried, "I must spin this straw into gold, and I don't know how." "What will you give me if I spin it for you?" the little man asked. "My necklace," answered the girl. The little man took her necklace and sat down at the spinning wheel. He pulled 3 times, and the spool was wound full of gold thread. He fitted another spool on, and 3 pulls, and that one was full too. And so it went until morning, when all the straw was spun and all the spools were full of gold. When the king came at sunrise, he was amazed and delighted, but all that gold only made him greedier. So he led the miller's daughter to a larger room filled with straw, and he ordered her to spin this straw too before dawn if she valued her life. Once again, very unfair, right? Just because he's greedy, she is suffering an unfair thing. The girl did not, the girl did not know what to do. She began to weep. Once more the door opened, and the little man stepped in. "What will you give me if I spin this straw into gold for you?" he asked. "The ring on my finger," answered the girl. And the little man took her ring. Then he set to spinning the wheel whirring. And before the night was over, he had spun all the straw into gleaming gold. Shortly after sunrise, the king returned. Piles of golden spools glowed in the morning light. The king rejoiced at the sight of so much gold, but still he was not satisfied. You know what that part reminds me of a little bit? Of how Pharaoh would say, "Yes, you can go," and then his heart would be hardened, and then he'd say, "No, never mind, you can't go." He couldn't be satisfied, could he? He led the miller's daughter to a third, even bigger room that was piled high with straw. "Tonight you must spin this straw too," ordered the king, "and if you succeed, you shall become my wife." Because, he thought, I could not find a richer wife in all the world. I wouldn't want to marry that dude, would you? Not that she would have had much choice. When the king had left, the little man approached for the third time. "What will you give me if I spin for you yet once more?" he asked. "I have nothing else," the girl replied. "Then promise that when you become queen, your first child will belong to me." The miller's daughter gasped. How could she promise such a thing? Then she thought, but who knows whether that will ever happen? And as she could think of no other way to save herself, she promised, and the little man once again spun all the straw into gold. She was kind of in a place where she didn't know what else to do, right? She got desperate. So she promised this weird thing, thinking, who knows, this probably won't even happen. But guess what? When the king came in the morning and found everything as he had wished, he married the miller's beautiful daughter, and she became the queen, with a fancy wedding, beautiful dress, little man nowhere in sight. A year passed, and the queen brought a handsome baby boy into the world. She gave scarcely a thought to the little man, but one day he suddenly appeared in her room. "Now, give me what you promised me," he demanded. The queen pleaded with the little man. Here he is. There's the baby and the queen, and there he is. He could take all the royal treasure if only he would let her keep her child. But her pleading was in vain. Then she began to weep so piteously that at last the little man was moved. "I will give you 3 days," he said. "If by the end of that time you know my name, you may keep your child." Long into the night the queen sat, and through the next day, thinking over all the names she had ever heard. That evening the little man returned, beginning with Caspar, Melchior, Balthazar. The queen recited every name she knew, one after another, but to each one the little man replied, "That is not my name." There's the baby. There's like her nursemaid, probably, servant. The second day the queen had inquiries made in town, searching for new names. And when the little man came that evening, she posed the strangest and most unusual ones to him. She tried beastie ribs, legoram, and string bones, but he would only reply, "That is not my name." Now, the queen grew truly frightened, and she sent her most faithful servant into the woods to look for the little man. So they're leaving the castle, and then it shows the servant kind of at different places in the woods, and over here, there, and there. The servant searched through thickets and over clearings deep into the forest. At last, near the top of a high hill, she spied him. See the little cooking pot there in the fire? He was riding on a cooking spoon around a great fire and crying out, "I brew my drink, I bake my loaves, and soon the queen's own son I'll claim. Oh, lucky me, for no one knows that Rumpelstiltskin is my name." The servant made her way back as fast as she could manage, and at midday reached the castle. You can imagine how glad the queen was when she heard the name. There's the servant. Late that evening, the little man arrived. "Now, Mrs. Queen," he said, "do you know my name, or do I take the child?" So the queen asked him, "Is your name Will?" "No." "Is your name Phil?" "No." "In that case, is your name Rumpelstiltskin?" "Who told you that? Who told you that?" shrieked Rumpelstiltskin, and in a fury he jumped on his cooking spoon and flew out the window. And he was never heard from again. Here's the king, doesn't have any idea what's been going on, right? And there goes Rumpelstiltskin on his cooking spoon. That was one of my favorite fairy tales when I was a kid. But one of the things about it that made me think of the Israelites, like I said at the beginning, was how unfair her situation is. Just like with the Israelites, how unfair it is for them. That it was already terrible, right? Because it said back in Exodus 2, it had said, they were crying out to God. The Israelites groaned in their slavery and cried out, and their cry for help because of their slavery went up to God, and he heard them. It was bad, and that was before Pharaoh decided in chapter 5 of Exodus, which we're going to study this week, that he was really mad and that we're going to take the straw away from them, make them gather their own straw, adding to an already horrible load of work for them, right? And demanding that they still produce the same amount, even though they have way more work to do. So that's what made me think of this, how unfair it is that she, because of her father's lie, she has to do this thing, and then ends up promising this little man to do, give her child, which is crazy. Of course, it's a fairy tale, so I'll pretend. But, the Bible is not. It's a true story of what happened to God's people, and of how God can be trusted, how God was there for them, and he wants them to put their trust in him, right? Even when things get so hard, like they are in Exodus 5. All right, guys, have a great week, and I can't wait to look at this Bible story with you more on Sunday.